Hello everyone. We are having a very special Astro Hangout with our international astrologers. So let's have a formal introduction for what we are going to do and with whom we are going to do. So first we have Puneet from Punneit Astrology, Trina from Alchemic Vibes. We have Lissabeta AstroDevi from New York. We have Ashwin Balaji. Hello, Celestial Vibes. And we have Fernando Raúl from Puerto Rico. Okay. And last but not the least, I am Ved Vyaskov from Ved Vyaskov Astrology. So we will be discussing what things the year 2020 will bring in our lives. Like last time, this year we saw that 2019 was very transformative year from many points of view in our personal, political, social life, and 2000 year seems to be equally promising. So here we just had an idea that we will discuss about the year 2020 in a very generic way from transit point of view and the main events point of view. So we have made a few point notes and every one of us will be discussing one of the topic. So if we can open up the debate or discussion, then we will start first. So uh, uh, if I give you the timeline firstly for the year, then I can share the screen here and we can have a kind of a uh, formal
Good
peak
view on
view.
the peak view on
Yeah, peak view for the year. So we see that for the year 2020, uh, we have Jupiter, Saturn, and Ketu conjunction. The year is opening with Jupiter, Saturn, and Ketu conjunction on 26th and 25th and 26th and 27th of December. There is a in the Christmas week, New Year week, there is a sixth planetary conjunction in the sign of Sagittarius, which will continue for some time. And year is opening with with Jupiter, Saturn, and Ketu three planetary conjunction till Saturn moves to the sign of Capricorn. Then Saturn will transit to Capricorn on 25th of January. Then we have another very special conjunction, Jupiter, Ketu, and Mars in the month of February and March. Then Saturn and Mars would be joining each other in the sign of Capricorn, and it will be joined by Jupiter. So this seems to be kind of a heavy year, very productive year. Then there is a regular retrogression of Saturn and Jupiter, and this year is also special in this case because this year Venus and Mars will also be retrograding. Okay, so there would be a special discussion on Venus and Mars retrograde, and there would be a four planetary conjunction this retrogression this year. Rahu and Ketu would be changing the axis in the month of September. September month seems to be very promising and very transformative as equally as the month of January. Okay, and then Jupiter moves to Capricorn and Mercury retrogrades for three times a year. So with this, we will open up the session, and I will pass on to Fernando Raúl. He will speak on something on the calendars, like why do we see the calendars? Yeah,
Yeah.
Fernando.
So, thank you, Ved. Hi, Trina. Hi, Puneet. Hi, Ashwin. Hi, Lissabeta. I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Usually, when I do these recounts of the new year here where I live, I usually start with an overview of the time system that we use, right? And a little bit of history to know what it means to be in the year 2020, because it's very important to see that the calendar that we use today in the common era is called the Gregorian calendar. But a lot of people don't know where it comes from, and a lot of people don't know why it is the way it is, right?
Yeah.
And the origin of it starts in Rome in the 8th, 7th century BC with not even the Republic or the Empire. We're talking about when Rome was led by kings. And there, a calendar came out which was called the Roman calendar. And that calendar placed January as the first month. Historians don't know why it happened, but it happened, because usually in other cultures, the new year, or at least the beginning of a new year, is represented by more common astrological phenomena like solstices or equinoxes. For example, you have, or the moon also. For example, you have the Chinese New Year, that is the new moon between January and February. You also have the New Year in Iran and in Persia, which is Nowruz, which is in the vernal equinox. And also in India, you have Diwali and you have Ugadi, depending on what region you use, and depending what calendar, if you use a Panchanga or a solar calendar. So you see that almost all of the cultures in the world have an astrological phenomenon to mark the new year, but not in the Gregorian calendar necessarily. Of course, January the 1st comes a few days, like a week after the winter solstice. But in a way, it does not represent like an important astrological phenomenon, like an equinox or a solstice, or even some sort of lunar panchanga or whatever, lunar phase or panchanga or whatever you want to call it. Historians say that January came first because it was the month alluded to the Roman god Janus, which is the god of doorways, which is a god of two faces, which also alludes a little bit to Purva Bhadrupada, because one of the symbols is the two-face person, besides the other symbol that is obviously the front legs of a god. So you see here where it comes from, right? And it started with the Roman calendar, then it got amended like in 50 BC by Julius Caesar, and then it became the Julian calendar when they started to add the leap year, right? But the calculation was wrong, right? And eventually Rome fell, and eventually the church came into power. And in the late 16th century, specifically in 1582, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Around that time.
The church came up with the Gregorian calendar, which is named after the Pope Gregory XIII, which was the idea that we're going to correct the calendar because the leap years were not correct. And some of the most important celebrations of the church were not falling in the correct astrological situations, like, for example, Easter in the equinox. So in 1482, they jumped like 10 days in October, and there it was inaugurated, the calendar that we all use today, because the Gregorian calendar got accepted by a few European countries, Catholic ones, then the Protestant ones, and then obviously we have the age of colonization, globalization, and to this day, almost everybody uses the Gregorian calendar. And now we're celebrating the new year, which is coming up in a few weeks. I mean, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I don't know. It's coming up soon. And we have to realize that 2020, although it has a numerological significance, depending on what school of numerology you choose, either Pythagorean or Indian or whatever, more than just the numerological meaning, it doesn't really have an astrological signification. So we see that the transits will not rely specifically to this date. So this is why most of these analyses from year to year are overviews of the transits in the signs without taking into evaluation like that change, because that change, as I told you, always has to do in most cultures with equinoxes, solstices, or the moon. So it's very important to have that in mind. Even though a new year is beginning, the planets don't necessarily know it's a new year. It's basically like a human way of measuring time. So, I always try to say that because it's very important for people to know the history of how we got here to, 2020, which is, by the way, 2020 after the supposed birth of Christ, which is today used not necessarily as after that day, but it's more used in other countries as the current era. So, yeah, this is very important to know because sometimes we kind of skip that detail, and it's very important. So that's everything I wanted to say about it.
Okay, it was very interesting.
Thank you.
So we will start with next topic, which is the transit of Saturn into Capricorn. So, Fernando, you and Lissabeta would continue.
Yes.
Yes.
Lissabeta, do you want to go first?
No. You.
I go first. Okay. Sure. Well, as
I thought you were in the flow, so you should speak continuously.
Yeah,
sure. Sure. So Saturn is right now is in Capricorn tropical, and it's going to be in tropical and sidereal Capricorn soon. So this is a good transit in principle, mainly because Saturn is going to his house, which is Makara Shani, right?
Yeah.
Or Saturn in Capricorn, and this will be specifically a Swakshetra position for a long time. And it's going to be in principle a good transit. Although, and I also say this in most of my New Year reviews, we have to see the transits from a mundane point of view, but also from a natal point of view.
Yes.
We have to see how the planets will affect the collective, the society, and we also have to see how it will affect us individually. And Saturn being in Capricorn, it is a good Shani in principle because it's Swakshetra. It's probably the third best position after Saturn in Libra and after Saturn in Mula Trikona, Aquarius, or Kumbha. So Swakshetra is basically the whole of Capricorn, and if I'm not mistaken, the last 10 degrees of Aquarius, which would be Swakshetra degrees. So in principle here, Shani, which is basically the servant of the planetary cabinet, is in his abode, is in his home to a certain degree. And Capricorn alludes a lot to swamps. It alludes to swampy fields, according to Yavana Yataka. So in essence, we see the serf going to his home, which will probably produce very good results. Now, that's in theory. In practice, for natal astrology, we have to see the Ashtaka Varga. And this is something that is usually not mentioned in a lot of these videos.
Yeah.
If you have your natal chart, you always measure the transits with Ashtaka Varga.
Yes.
And we're going to see this in all the planets that we're going to mention in all these videos and throughout this video. It's very important to see that because Makara Shani is not going to be the same for me. It's not going to be the same for you. It depends on the points you have in the bindus, which will flow from 8 to 0, right? 0, 1, 2, it's not that good. 3, 4, 5, it's medium. 6, 7, 8 is outstanding. Of course, 8 Shani, that almost never happens. But if you have good pointages in either Saturn or the Jupiter planets that we're going to mention strongly in this video, then it's probably going to be a good transit for you. And at the same time, we have to remember that planetary periods are more important than transit. Of course, there are some transits that are very specific that will create a lot of power. But in essence, we have to see in what period we are in terms of our being Shotari Dasha or other Dashas that other people might use, like Yogini. It's basically we have to.
Give him a second.
Yeah.
But we must remember to always watch the Ashtaka Varga. And also, if we're in a Mahadasha of Jupiter, we have to see the transit of Jupiter also that we're going to discuss further on with the Ashtaka Varga in order to know how this heterogeneous transit will affect us individually.
Okay.
So, Lisa, do you want to continue?
Yes, I will continue and give my tidbits about Saturn transit in Capricorn. So I practice a little bit more mundane astrology, and I put like my intuitive and psychological spin on it because I feel like, Saturn does have a very strong psychological effect on everyone. And so one of the things I did want to point out is I'm very happy for Scorpio ascendants and moon signs because Saturn is going to now be in Capricorn. So the people with moon in Scorpio will no longer be going through their Sati Sati. But the ones with their moon in Aquarius will be entering their Sati Sati. But I don't think it will be a very bad beginning for them as Saturn is in its home and in its place where it has strength and it's like returning to a place of comfort. And one of the things that I do enjoy about this transit, and I think that everyone else should enjoy about this transit, is the fact that when Saturn enters back into its home, it has a really strong ability to really bring their structure back into our lives, because that's something that we've all felt like we've been lacking in 2019. So in 2020, I feel like there's going to be a sense of among people where they're finally being able to get structure back into their lives. stability. I feel that the economy is going to be much more stable in the year 2020. Although some people are like, no, it's not going to happen. That's not what I'm saying. I feel like there'll be more stability with jobs, occupations. In fact, I actually believe that there's ability for more jobs to present themselves because Saturn is going to be aspecting the sign of Pisces and Libra by third and 10th houses away. I also suspect that people are probably going to tend to be a little bit more religious, more spiritual, you know, tapping into that spiritual side of them, connecting psychologically with the spiritual side, you know, trying to use this as a foundation for this bit, for their business, for whatever it is. So they're going to be also tapping into their passions, their talents. They might even be rediscovering some talents because through their relationships with other people. And I could also see that there will be a lot more commitment in terms of businesses, more commitment in terms of being able to start something and have it finished through, because Saturn is also the planet of commitment. And so a lot of people, you know, were struggling with being able to commit to their business, to relationships, to their children, you know, whatever part and area of life it is. And so the nice thing about Saturn in 2020 is people are going to be able to establish a sense of commitment with their responsibilities, with maybe doing some humanitarian work, because Saturn is also a very selfless planet. And so, you know, in 2019, we tend to be a little bit more selfish. And in 2020, we're going to be more selfless because Saturn's also the servant. Saturn wants to help. Saturn wants to give. So we're going to have a lot of information coming to us, a lot of opportunities coming to us, a lot of people helping each other. And you're going to see how community and societies are really going to expand in the sense of wanting to work together as a global, you know, network. And my only hesitation about that, and I'm going to discuss this later with Pluto transiting in Capricorn, is that we have to be careful that, you know, as a society, when we're helping, we have to be conscious of who we're committing to, who we're getting involved with, who are we partnering up with, you know, whether it's a project, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a, you know, relationship, anything in terms of with other people. Why? Because Saturn also is going to be aspecting Libra, and Libra is, of course, the sign of partnerships and relationships. So there has to be more of a conscious awareness of who are we going to be partnering up with? And because Saturn's also the planet of responsibility, we need to be able to take on more responsibility and more conscious efforts about doing things. Because Saturn's about teaching us how to grow up. We're going to be maturing now, you know. It's no more wah, 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 me, you know, everyone acting like babies like they did in 2019. And I'm not saying that everyone is a baby, but, you know, sometimes when things get difficult as they were in 2019, we tend to, you know, internalize our pain and we forget about everybody else. In 2020, it's realizing it's not just about us, it's about everyone else involved. And so this is going to be the beauty about Saturn coming into Capricorn. And yes, when Saturn starts to enter its retrograde period between May 11th, 2019 up until September 30th, 2020, you know, there might be a little bit a sense of where they're losing control. So I don't want people to feel like, you know, things are really going to be out of control when Saturn goes retrograde. It's more of being aware. Saturn wants you to be aware of where you lacked control in your life, you know, where you lack the ability to take responsibility. Because I feel like sometimes, you know, there's like this negative idea about planets going into retrogression period, you know, because it's like that much more closer and powerful to the earth. It's not about a time of chaos. It's about a time of owning up to the responsibility, owning up where you fell off as a person and as a society and as a whole. And so we're also going to witness governments, you know, trying to step up and take more control of the situation. But when Saturn goes through its retrograde period, society is going to say, hey, maybe there's a little bit too much control. We need to take back a little bit more power. So there will be a power struggle between governments and authorities and father figures, you know, and big corporations. So there's going to be that sense where people are going to be evaluating where they're going, where they're coming. And also because Saturn also represents borders and limitations, you know, and delays, we're going to see, well, where were we limited? where, are we creating these borders in our life? And the other thing that I'm sensing is we might see amongst other countries, debates and fights over borders, but I feel like when it'll happen when Saturn's retrograde, but as soon as that retrograde period ends, it's almost like there's going to be, what's the word that I'm looking for? There's going to be like a decisive awareness of where everyone's borders, limits, restrictions are being settled. So there's going to be a lot of settlements taking place because Saturn's like the judge. He's going to whack his little hammer and say, hey, this is how it's going to be. So I just think it's really important for the viewers watching this video to be aware of that and to take that into consideration and not to be intimidated by Saturn, because Saturn ultimately is the tough love kind of parent, and a lot of people in society, especially today's generation, everyone wants to be a crybaby, and it's time to kind of like step out of that mode, because I have to say, at least in the Western world, the generation's a little bit different, as in terms of other countries, people tend to mature a little bit sooner than later. So there's definitely going to be an amazing growth period in 2020. I'm really excited for that. And I feel like it's going to be very beneficial to everyone and to the businesses and to the economy, straight to even the home. And that's my little take on that.
Okay. So overall, we can say that at this moment, a lot of chaos is going on around the world, and Saturn's transit into Capricorn will bring more of a stability, structure, and discipline all around.
Yes.
Okay. So, Ashwin.
Yeah. One moment.
Okay.
Oh my God! What? It changed.
Ashwin is back with the green screen. Huh?
Welcome back to the world of magic.
Magic happened. Magic happened. Magic happened.
Okay, so thanks everyone again for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to talk with so many people. So yeah, my proposal was to talk about Jupiter cycle and the historical overview of what it is going to be. So I'm just removing my earpiece because I'm hearing myself, which is very, very annoying. Okay. So the idea is Jupiter and Saturn kind of come into a conjunction for like 19 and a half or 20 years once, which is a very, very crucial period in not in one natal perspective, but entire global economic, national, and whatever you may want to call it on a macro sense. So it's a very crucial transit, and Saturn's conjunction happens like, so there is a pattern in which Saturn conjunction happens, and each triplicity carries on for 200 years. So for example, if Saturn and Jupiter come into a conjunction in Aries, which is a fire sign, in a particular year, after 200 years, it just shifts back to another triplicity, and like Earth, again air and water, so on. So the cycle of triplicity is 800 years, and in one triplicity, like in one conjunction, Saturn, I mean, there is a square between Jupiter and Saturn for every 5 years, and 10 years is opposition, and again 15th year is square, and again it's a conjunction. So now we are having the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. We had it for a while in the sign of Sagittarius, and then it's going to be in Capricorn, I think, during the late March or early April of 2020, which is what our major topic is. So the last of fire triplicity conjunction was in Sagittarius in the 1960, and after that the conjunction shifted to the Earth triplicity. So from now it's going to be like Saturn and Jupiter will be conjunct from the backward trines. So earlier it was in Taurus in 1980, and then Virgo, and then now it's Capricorn. So it's backward trine that happens, and the shifted to Earth's triplicity in 1980, and it will continue for another 140 years before moving into air triplicity of Libra in the year 2159. So there is a lot of things that is going to happen in the world. None of us is going to live to see whatever is going to happen after a few years. So the last conjunction on an Earth sign is in 2139. So, society and mankind and technology and almost everything is going to change, hopefully for good. So, but why does this Jupiter and Saturn conjunction become very, very important, and it becomes a very hot topic and a selling point for astrologers? Is because the previous conjunctions in Capricorn happened in the year 1160 CE, 1226, 1344, 1403, 1902, 1961. So earlier I said that in one triplicity the conjunction takes place for every 200 years. But here the thing is that there is a difference between mean and true conjunction. So before getting into a conjunction in Capricorn, Saturn and Jupiter came into a conjunction for a short while in the sign of Sagittarius. So it is because of the true conjunction and not the mean conjunction. So the true conjunction is basically the fact where we take it from the geocentric point of view and calculate the true value or true position of planets from Earth. But mean conjunction is different. Which is a Ptolemaic model which calculates the position of planets based upon the epicycles of the planets. So the conjunction is actually in place in the point of view of mean conjunction only when the epicycles are actually in conjunction. So ideally in mundane astrology, mean conjunction is a very, very huge phenomenon, but I don't want to get into that. But the reason why there are so many conjunctions between Saturn and Jupiter is because of this true conjunction. And if you actually look at the mean conjunction, the conjunction doesn't take place in one triplicity for before the 200th year. Okay, so that's the idea of it. And the before 800 years, there was a conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, which is approximately not exactly 800 years, but it's 1226 AD. And there was a lot of things that happened I'm basically concentrating on Europe. What happened in India is like Marathas kind of took over and started opposing and started waging battles against the Muslim or Islamic invaders in India, which was a very, very important thing, especially in India, because there was a huge amount of Muslim invasion and a lot of Indian history and culture was destroyed. For example, in the early 12th century, we saw the destruction of the Nalanda University, which was not exactly during the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, but it was because of the Islamic invaders. And Marathas in the year 1226 or around that particular Saturn-Jupiter conjunction started waging a war, and they opposed the Islamic rulers, which was the beginning of Indians actually opposing the Marathas. So, and what happened in France and Germany is probably, I'm not sure how many people know it, but Muslim invaders also took over France and the southeastern European parts, where there was also again wars waged against the Muslims in those areas as well. And sometime in the year 1226, the French King Louis VIII was killed, and Louis IX. Sorry.
All on the loose.
Yeah. I think Ved is very good in history. So Louis IX became a king at the age of 8 or 9, which paved way for the English people to actually take advantage of that, and which was probably the beginning of French decline, or whatever you may want to call it. I'm not sure what happened after that, but pretty much the decline of French Empire was probably signaling in the year 1226 when Saturn and Jupiter were in conjunction in the sign of Capricorn. So many things happened in England and Kingdom of Wales and many other countries surrounding the Islamic regions or ruled by the Islamic invaders. So, and there was also one thing where the ruler of a kingdom in Vietnam actually committed a suicide, which was again the fall of a great emperor and also an empire. So it is a signal that something entirely huge from a political point of view or economic or a societal point of view is going to happen when Jupiter and Saturn comes into conjunction. So, for example, if you see in 2001, the conjunction was in Taurus, I think. So we had 9/11 attacks in the USA where twin towers were destroyed. So it is not something that we actually cheer about. It's a but the thing is, it was the first point where the entire countries, including USA, started opposing the terrorism, and things changed against terror. So even just before, I don't consider this 1 year or 1.5 year difference as a huge difference when it comes to mundane astrology and planetary cycles, because if we take mundane mean conjunction into consideration, the Balakot attack that India did in Pakistan is probably close to a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction as well. So all these come into one particular radar. So whatever we can expect is terrorist attacks, financial breakdowns, and we may also see a lot of societal changes, a very specific religious activity coming into core, which might actually be carried on for next 100 or 1,500 years, which might actually turn out to be a specific ritual, and it will have a history after 1,000 years or so. So, and there can also be religious tension, rise of one religion is always closing of another religion. So when Persians were gone and Islamic rulers came in at around 5th or 6th century CE, so there was very less Persian stuff that is left, and we don't have a lot of surviving materials from the Persian literature, and even astrological literature. We have limited amount of stuff from Sasanian Iran and other part of Persian Empire. So there's a lot of changes in leadership, and again Boris Johnson kind of came in with a huge majority, which is yet another signal of Saturn and Jupiter. It would have been easily possible that he would have lost it. There is a specific thing in his natal chart as well. I don't want to get into that, but still, it's a signal of something, that a huge change that might actually happen, which might probably be Brexit, as we all know. So it's funny that all this had to wait for past 2 or 2.5 years before the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and loss of power at the national level is largely possible because of the death of a major political leader or leader of the nation, and it is also one of those times where the weaker things stronger things take charge or take advantage over the weaker things. For example, we have Jupiter in the sign of its fall, and Saturn is taking over Jupiter, and Saturn has to feel Jupiter. So, especially from electional astrology point of view, it is hard for us to choose elections. I think there was a simple point that we were discussing about on that day. So it's difficult to choose elections during this time. And this is what I just wanted to talk about. So 800 years of a cycle, and we are heading towards another Earth conjunction, which is going to be which is going to bring about a huge amount of changes, probably than the previous conjunction, because this is conjunction a move which is entirely different from fixed or other signs. Yeah.
Okay. So you gave a very good historical perspective, and we have few more things on Saturn and Jupiter coming up, which will be taken up by Fernando and Punneit.
Okay, so thank you, Ashwin, for that great insight on the Saturn cycle, Saturn-Jupiter cycle. That was quite an interesting one. It was quite knowledgeable one to know that so many things happen, and there's a common link between these events that happens all over the globe, and that gives us a great insight on how powerful astrology as a tool, as a mathematical tool, can be. So Fernando also discussed, and Lissabeta also discussed about the Saturn transit into Capricorn, and Jupiter is in Sagittarius, and Saturn will be in Capricorn on January end. Now, there is also going to be a brief period when Jupiter, which is moving fast, will also cross the boundary of Sagittarius and move to Capricorn. And then Jupiter will try to join Saturn. And once the Jupiter reaches the edge of its transit into the zodiac of Capricorn, Jupiter will slow down and then it will move retrograde. So here I would request Ved to show the dates to the folks who will be watching this on YouTube, the dates of retrogression. So
Okay.
Ved, if you can share the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the
Just a second.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you can see that there is a double transit in Capricorn that is happening around 29th of March, but something special happens around 11th of May. On 11th of May, Saturn is going retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, and this will continue till 30th of September. In the same time, just after 3 days, Jupiter is going retrograde in the same sign of Capricorn. Now, what is significance? What is the importance about this double retrogression? So I personally hold retrogression as a very focused approach on the planet. Astronomically, the planets are closer to the Earth, and this is just the basic physics. And it is considered that because the planets are closer, they have a greater influence on humanity. There's one more aspect to it. Retrogression offers a very keen and a very concentrated point of view of planets on certain areas of life. Retrogression is a highly focused nature of the planet, where the planetary energy is focused on at least one single area on the zodiac of Capricorn. Now you have to see where Capricorn lies in your horoscope, in which house the Capricorn is, first house, second house, third house, wherever Capricorn will be. Saturn and Jupiter will try to concentrate the karmic and the gyan, that means the karma and the knowledge, wisdom aspect on that particular house. And you have to identify that, you have to also see that these planets are making you work to know more about at least one attribute of the house where Capricorn will be situated. Understand one thing, that Capricorn is also, I believe that it is the 10th house. It's the karmic house. The karmic lord is going there in the sign of Capricorn. So Saturn will be overpowered. Saturn will be charged up because it is his own home. He is comfortable there. He can make things do. And when Jupiter, which is debilitated in the zodiac of Capricorn, I'm not considering about the point of debilitation or something. I'm talking about in a very generic sense. Jupiter goes debilitated. That means wisdom has to listen. Now, this is how I explain. When Jupiter is debilitated in sign of Capricorn, especially when it is in the Shravana Nakshatra, it's like the teacher is now in school. The teacher wants to upgrade. The teacher wants to learn. So the teacher no longer teaches. So it's like we as a student, when we are in the classroom of universe, we find the teacher absent. The teacher himself is the student now. So that means the wisdom that we hold in our life needs further upgradation. That is exactly what is going to happen from the sign of Capricorn. And Saturn, being the retrograde at that point of time, will make it more focused. That means a lot of actions will come into picture. And this also means that we will feel restricted initially. And to understand that restriction, to break that restriction, to at least take control, take the matters in our own hand, do the karma, Saturn and Jupiter retrogression will play a very vital and significant role in each and every one of our life, not only in the mundane astrology, but also at a very personal level. This combined retrogression, I will request Ved to again share the screen and show. So the combined retrogression of Saturn and Jupiter will play a very vital role in unlocking areas through karma. So you will be made or forced to do things. You will be made to accept few things. So acceptance and gratitude will become a very prominent key at this point of time. How do you accept the circumstances? How do you rely on your wisdom? Do you need more knowledge on these areas where you want to work on? Is the theme of this retrogression. Now, also, I would like to draw the attention on the Jupiter's retrogression. Jupiter is not going to be retrograde completely in Capricorn. Because Jupiter is actually naturally in Sagittarius, it has moved into Capricorn. That means Jupiter is supposed to come back to Sagittarius, which is his own sign. That means, understand, suppose there is a physics teacher who is teaching a subject. Now, he wants to teach it in a better way. So on a weekend, he goes to a classroom, he brushes up few of the vital and important topics that he forgot. Then he comes back on Monday and he starts teaching again to his students. That means it's a more advanced way of Jupiter dealing with the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this may create some kind of a difficult scenario for some. This may be good for some. That totally depends on the individual's horoscope. But this retrogression will be very focused, very karmic, and I would say the output, the ultimate output, that means once these both planets goes out of retrogression somewhere around end of September and mid of September, we all will see that our life has been transformed in a way that we have more wisdom and more maturity, because Saturn is the symbol of maturity. Saturn is the symbol of some sort of responsibility, as Lissabeta said. It's a planet of taking control on our life, but in a very slow way. Also, because of the retrogression, there can be some hasty scenarios. There can be scenarios where things are moving faster than expected, because retrogression in Sanskrit means vakrigati. Vakri is actually literally translated not as reverse, but crooked or deviated. So this means that the Saturn and Jupiter's effect will be slightly deviated from natural. So how we have to observe this? We have to find out where the Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius and Pisces zodiacs are in our horoscope. These four zodiacs, which are consecutive, that is also we have to understand. These zodiacs are consecutive. And these four zodiacs will be the one which is highly affected because of the retrogression. So we have to collectively add A, B, C, D, A plus B plus C plus D, the attributes of these four houses, wherever it is. Maybe it is like 8, 9, 10, 11th houses. Maybe it is like 4, 5, 6, 7 houses. You have to collectively observe the attributes of these houses and identify where the Capricorn is, and you have to pinpoint on the attributes of that house and see how your life is taking, where your life is headed to at that point of time. And once these focused energies will work on you, yes, you will be made uncomfortable. Why? Because the natural aspect of these two planets will be on the Cancer zodiac. Cancer zodiac is the natural fourth house, the house of comfort, the house of nourishment. So this is a natural way, with Rahu also being in the Gemini zodiac, which is, I would say, 8th from Capricorn. That is also one way of transformation. So this is where the entire world shifts and translates and transcends into a very different plane of information. There can be an information boom at that point of time. You will be overloaded with work. There will be slightly a chaotic situation at that point of time, but this is a good chaos. Again, I will repeat, this is a good chaos. Because of this, Jupiter and Saturn is a very, very slow moving, and these are the two largest planets in the solar system. And then these two planets go hand in hand. Definitely it means that some positive output is supposed to come. Jupiter will translate back, will move back into the zodiac of Sagittarius, while Saturn is retrograding in Capricorn. That is also a significance, because karma keeps on moving, focused karma keeps on, the wheel of the karma keeps on rotating, while the knowledge goes back and resets itself in the sign of Sagittarius. So here, this is a very crucial time where you have to be very much focused, and application of knowledge will come into picture. I will not be surprised if there is a huge breakthrough in the world of physics, in the world of science, some new theories, some new formulations can come, some new breakthroughs can come, quantum leaps can happen, anything can happen at this point of time, because the knowledge is being reset. First it goes, it learns, and it comes back. So the error correction is being happening at this point of time. The amount of error that the planets are doing, that if there is any deviation, it is being reset, corrected, and the error correction is of high importance. This means you will get a chance to correct any errors that you have created. If there is any a negative yoga in your kundli, this window can help you negate that energy, at least gain the positive out of it. So here, my final words on this retrogression is that I hold this retrogression as one of the most important retrogression of all the times. And because this is a very powerful karmic and dharmic retrogression. Karma is Capricorn and Sagittarius is Dharma. So karma and dharma goes hand in hand, resets itself. This only means that the humanity is going on a higher plane. That's it, Ved.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Fernando?
Fernando, do you have to
Very
say
good. Yes, very, very good. I just wanted to say that Ashwin's historical explanation was very good, and Puneit's definition of how Saturn and Jupiter will work are also very good. I just wanted to add a few notes to let you know, Jyotisha, as well as other traditional astrological schools, our schools where tradition is very important. And in traditional astrology, we do not use Trans-Saturnians, although some people might use them. But it is very important to realize the importance of the Shani Guru transits. These were the slowest moving planets until like 250 years ago, more or less, until 1781 when we discovered Uranus. And it is very important for mundane astrology, the cycles that these planets go through. And right now we are approaching this grand conjunction, and we can see it either sidereally or tropically, but in a way, the grand conjunctions represent great time markers, and the last great conjunction in terms of the triplicity that came before this one was in the early 19th century. And during the early 19th century, from a tropical perspective, we changed from conjunctions that were from fire to earth, triplicity. And during the early 19th century, we had basically the beginning of the modern nation state, which obviously started in Europe and then throughout the last 200 years has caused a lot of revolutions, a lot of wars, and the coming of the modern age as we know it. These started with the Napoleonic Wars, and now these last conjunctions, which have been in the late 20th century, we see that things are changing in the modern world. So we see that these last triplicity conjunctions started in the early 19th century, specifically between 1802 and 1842, which is basically the beginning of the modern nation state, and as a consequence of the beginning of globalization as we know it. And now, these grand conjunctions that are occurring now, and we must remember that always the grand conjunctions begin in a new triplicity. The last one was in the triplicity that came before it, and the previous one was in the triplicity that is going to begin the new cycle of 200 years, which is a cycle within a bigger cycle, depending on who you cite in terms of traditional astrology. But in a way, this new triplicity grand conjunction started in 1981 and will extend itself till now in 2020 when we start these grand conjunctions in a new triplicity as a whole. And if we see the development of the last 40 years, we start to see like the coming of age of globalization. We see the beginning of the internet. We see the beginning of things like cryptocurrency, the dark web. We see a lot of things that are beginning to manifest over this new triplicity of conjunctions. From the tropical point of view, it's air conjunctions, right? And we just came out of earth conjunctions. Ashwin, I'm sorry, from sidereal point of view, is it from fire to earth now?
No,
right?
The last fire conjunction was in the year 1960. So it already shifted to earth. From tropical point of view, it's going to be, I think the previous conjunction was in Scorpio, and now it's going to, not Scorpio, but Aries. Now it's going to shift to Aquarius.
Correct. That would
so
be
it's the backwards trine. So yeah.
Correct. So either way you see it, you see how the trine works, because these conjunctions occur more or less in 120 degrees of difference from every 20 years or so, and then you change the whole triplicity. We have to take that into consideration. Although you see kind of the same thing going on with this Indian thing, which is called Sashti Purti, like the idea when you're 60 years old. Sashti Purti, yeah, the idea of you having the second Saturn return and the fifth Jupiter return, and how that is like a coming, like a born again situation. Well, we kind of see this with the grand conjunction from a mundane point of view. So in a way, more than these modern interpretations of the age of Aquarius and so on, the grand conjunctions are a great timing technique to indicate great changes in the world from a mundane point of view. And we are right there in the change. We are right there in a new beginning that starts now in 2020, which we kind of started in 1981 in terms of this new change in frequency. So I just wanted to say that, but a great contribution by you all. I'm really glad I'm here with you you guys, talking about these topics.
Thank you, Fernando.
So,
Yeah, Ved.
yeah. So now we will move forward. Uh, uh, does anyone has to speak more about Saturn and Jupiter? This is a final chance.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. So
Yeah.
my to say hi, everybody.
Hello.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that, what I found very interesting looking back in history, I don't even have my notes in front of me and I wish I did, but I've noticed there was always a threat, at least in the US, there's always been like a threat to the president. So in other words, when the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction takes place, it always seems to be like a threat to the current president's life. And we've seen it with JFK when he lost his life. We've seen it with Ronald Reagan when there was an attempt to assassination on his life. And I believe with Bush Jr., there was also almost a time where he almost took his life.
There was an assassination attempt. Yeah, it wasn't successful, but it was. And now we see with Trump the idea of the impeachment.
I think Ronald Reagan was also not successful in the year 1981.
But he got shot. He got shot.
But he got shot. But he escaped when actually it was the conjunction. So he did not pass away during the conjunction. But still, it is a very crucial point because it is a huge threat to the leader of the nation.
Yes. So we're going to be seeing that with the current president, Donald Trump, in the U.S. And it's interesting. It's happening in his sixth house. So it's very possible something, some kind of attempt assassination event could take place. And, I like to be an optimistic thinker. So I'd like to think that, he will be protected because, at the same time, although in regards to his chart, although Jupiter rules his fifth and his eighth house, still Saturn rules his sixth and his seventh house. So he might be saved because Jupiter is a benefic planet. It does provide blessings and protection, because it is the ruler of his fifth house. So if some such event was to happen, there is a very strong possibility that, he would be okay. But it's definitely going to be an interesting time because it's going to shift the direction of the United States. And interestingly, with Saturn inside the sign of Capricorn, it is inside the second house of the United States. So then we could also see and take place the currency, being changed on a global scale, because New York City, as many of us know, is the financial district of the world. So whatever happens in the U.S. definitely affects the economy everywhere around the world. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all these things take place. I just wanted to plug that in real quick.
Nice, Lissabeta. And also, I have one more point to add. If you have just raised about the topic about the threat to the global leaders. If you talk about authority and global leadership, you also talk about Sun coming into picture. Now, when you talk about Sun, if you see, Sun will also be with Rahu. And when Saturn is making its transit into the sign of Capricorn, Sun is already present in Capricorn. So it's like the Sun comes first in contact with Saturn, and around, I think, June to July, mid-June to mid-July, tell me if I'm correct, Sun will be in the sign of Gemini.
Yes.
And Sun will be with Rahu. So there will be again a Sun-Rahu conjunction at that particular month, which is actually, sixth from Capricorn, if you see. It is sixth from Capricorn. So the Saturn-Rahu, the Saturn-Jupiter and the Sun-Rahu forms a 6-8 combination. That's a threat on the Sun, actually. Yes. So that again plays a very vital role. So if we can find out the days when Moon goes against all these placements, that can again pinpoint the timeline of days which can be dangerous for the world, and especially for the global leaders. Yep.
Okay. So I think we have a good discussion on Saturn and Jupiter. Now we move to next topic of retrogression, and this is a special year because this time not only Saturn and Jupiter and Mercury, the three regular planets, will be retrograding. This year Mars and Venus will also be retrograding. So I and Ashwin will be talking something on the Mars and Venus. Now the thing is that this year is very special because as we saw, this year we will be having 4 planetary simultaneous retrogression. That is from the period of June 18th till 1st of July. Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, all 4 planets would be retrograding. And
Great.
as
It will be
Puneet
great
mentioned,
if you share the screen
yeah,
and tell. Yeah,
yeah,
that will be
yeah,
great.
yeah. And as Puneet mentioned that at that time, Sun would be with Rahu in the period of June to July. So that could be, I think, we can say pinpoint that there are 4 planets which are retrograde, and at the same time, Sun is with Rahu. So it could be kind of a very troublesome period for all kinds of people, or uh, uh, more for the government around the world, which it could be kind of a troublesome period for those people. Now, we talk about the retrogression of Venus and Mars. Firstly, Venus will retrograde. Venus will be retrograding simultaneously with Jupiter and Saturn, because if we see, then Saturn starts retrogression on 11th of May, Jupiter on 14th of May, and Venus on 30th of May. So the period, so the month of May would be the month of beginning where all the 3 planets will retrograde. And as we see, as we know that Venus is a planet which represents all kinds of luxuries, woman, sexuality, relationship, and all those aspects. It will be retrograding in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is a very important sign for Venus, which is the natural second house, and this is a sign which represents accumulation of resources. So what we can say that in this particular period, it would not only be kind of troublesome for women, but it would be more of a period where family and family relationship would be kind of troubled, and the resources around the world would be wasted. So we can see that in that particular period there could be kind of some big event where some resources, like we can say that there could be certain major spilling of oil incident, or certain kind of wastage of resource event, a certain major pollution happening, or some such kind of things would be happening during the period of retrogression of Venus. Okay. Other than that, Mars would be retrograding in the period from 10th September till 14th of November. It would be a kind of a big time period for the retrogression of Mars. And just like Venus is a planet related to femininity, Mars is a planet of masculinity, showing of power, then fighting spirit, violence. And as Mars retrograde, like here we see that Venus would be retrograding in the sign of Taurus, while Mars will be retrograding in the sign of Aries and Pisces. And this is a kind of a Gandanta. So Mars will be showing its movement. It will going from Aries to the sign of Pisces. In Aries, Mars is very strong. It is its own Mool Trikon. And from that, it will be moving to the sign of Pisces, where Mars is not at all comfortable. Pisces is a natural 12th house, and 12th house is a house of losses. So we can say that during that time period, there would be kind of a Mars represents aggression. Retrogression of Mars from fire sign to water sign may represent certain kind of passive aggression. Okay, so this could be a time period where people may show more of a passive aggressive behavior, and it could be also be the period particularly troublesome for maintaining the law and order, because it can show up, it can flare up more of a terrorist activities around the world. So we need to be careful, we need to be watchful during this particular retrogression of Mars, because last time when Mars was retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, there was a sudden peak in the terrorist activities around the world. Okay, so here Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Now here Mars will be in Aries. So this would be a kind of a troublesome period in maintaining the situation of law and order. Public uh, would be on the streets. They would be protesting, and it could be kind of a difficult situation for government to maintain the situation of law and order in control. Ashwin, do you want to say continue on the topic of Venus and Mars?
Yeah, sure. I think Puneet gave a very good overview of what retrogression means and
Yes.
he pretty much covered everything with this beautiful explanation of the karma and dharma stuff, like going back and forth. And you also gave a very good explanation about the retrogression of Mars and Venus. So I don't think I have much to add, but let me just give a quick tidbit of what I found. Um, you said that four planets are going retrograde. So Venus goes retrograde in Taurus, and there is going to be a trine relationship between Saturn Jupiter conjunction and Venus in Taurus. So I mean, I don't want to overstate or overblow this phenomenon of Saturn Jupiter retrogression, but the outer planets cannot do much without the trigger that inner planet provides.
Yes.
So the personal planet provides the trigger, and the Saturn Jupiter trine with Venus retrograde in Taurus is probably a huge trigger point in terms of global shutdown, or like Lisa said, it's going to be a threat for a leader. And if you look back in history, whenever a leader died, or whenever a leader was assassinated, Venus was invariably retrograde. So Venus's retrogression is a huge phenomenon when it comes to mundane astrology, or when you talk about threat to global leaders or so on. So it's important to consider that Venus in retrograde in its own domicile is still going to be a little bit tricky, because this is a destabilizing period. Only the good thing is that we don't have a hard aspect between Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. It's an easier flowing trine aspect, so which is probably a saving grace. On the other hand, if you see Mars is running backwards from Aries to Pisces, which is a significant move, as you explained. And Mars is not entirely comfortable in Pisces. Mars is probably the most laziest in the sign of Pisces, and there is a lot of things, as you said. The kindling of terror activities when Mars is kind of in the active zone. So Mars in Pisces aspected by Saturn. If you consider the third aspect of Saturn from Capricorn, from the Vedic aspect, from like Saturn throws over Mars, is a very crucial aspect. It forms a and Jupiter is also there. So the good thing again is that Jupiter is receiving Mars in its own sign, which is a reception concept in medieval astrology. And there is one more important thing to notice, that Jupiter and Saturn are not really in conjunction in Capricorn when Mars actually moves into Pisces, because Jupiter retrogrades back into Sagittarius. And so it probably is a good thing, because but many of us don't want Saturn and Jupiter together when Saturn aspects Mars. So we need Jupiter providing some kind of strength. So if Jupiter needs to provide some kind of strength to Mars, if Jupiter needs to mitigate some of the negative effects, we need Jupiter to be in a good dignity, which Jupiter attains in Sagittarius. So I'm kind of relieved with what Mars retrograde is going to offer. It is probably just going to be like, we need to channelize our own energy in the right way, because we might do things that are not priority. We might concentrate on things that are not really good priority. I'm talking from my own experience, because I have my Mars in Pisces, and Mars stations direct exactly on my natal degree. So it's a very crucial point to note that it might actually not be as bad as we might expect. So we are in for a good reprieve, but still Venus retrograde is something that we might actually look out for, because it might actually cause some kind of destability in our otherwise very stable life. So let's kind of it's important to anticipate things, or anticipate destability, so that we will be in a better position to handle things in a better way.
One more point comes to my mind regarding this particular retrogression of Venus. Now, what we are seeing, that at this moment certain kind of recession or lack of production is going on, and with Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars coming in Capricorn, there would be a sudden trigger or peak in the production capacity of the world. So overall there would be much more productivity coming on industrial production. I'm speaking particularly about. So the things and the goods in the market would be market would be producing the goods in a very high capacity. But the thing is that when Saturn and Jupiter will retrograde, what I see the situation is that though there would be goods in the market, but the
Exactly.
demand may go down, and
Yeah.
because of that, and particularly when Venus retrogrades, Venus see is in the Taurus. Taurus is a natural second house which shows our finances and income. So it may show that there is a lot of production, but demand is low because people are having lesser money. So the
Yeah.
prices of goods will come down, we may say that there would be a kind of a negative inflation, that there would be a kind of price drop of the things for a certain period of time, which would be not be a kind of a very positive scenario, because there would be overproduction and under consumption type of thing, which may give hard times to people who are engaged in who are self-employed kind of people, like shopkeepers or individual vendors kind of things, that they will not be getting the fair price of that goods. This would be kind of a particular scenario. Though this is a general scenario, it may depend on where your Taurus sign is in your chart, and dependent on that, Venus would be giving result. But this is a general scenario that you will not be getting a kind of fair price of your worth. Okay, so this was. Does anyone has any comment on Venus and Mars retrogression?
Now, one more. I think you beautifully brought up that point. You almost brought the financial astrology factor inside. So I just wanted to add one more thing is, as you said, there is never going to be the inline thing between demand and supply in the year of 2020. So when there is more supply, there is less demand, and when there is more demand, there is less supply. So it's going to be a back and forth thing in the entire 2020 because of Jupiter's position, and also because of Venus's position. Because let's not forget, before entering Taurus, Venus is going to be in Aries, so which will cause a lot of instability in the markets itself, global financial markets. And as and when Venus moves into Taurus after a few days, probably 15 or 16 days after Venus moving into Taurus, it goes retrograde. And there's not much that we can expect from financial markets point of view, and there is probably going to be a recession towards the end of 2020 and early 2021. So real recession.
I think you know much better because you are also in financial sector, Ashwin.
Yeah, which is why I'm feeling it very hard to resist to talk when it comes to, when you kindle the topic. So
okay, so wait. Okay, okay. Wait. So we will continue with. Okay, now enough of retrogression. We will talk about few planets which are naturally retrograde, or say they move in a anti-zodiac fashion all the time. Okay, so besides Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mars doing their things, there are two major planets which everyone fears about. At least astrologers make people to fear about those two planets, Rahu and Ketu.
That is true. There's so much of fear mongering going on in the name of these two planets.
Yeah, and Rahu particularly is at this moment in its own nakshatra, very powerful nakshatra of Adra, and it is creating literally a havoc all around the world. At least it is creating a big havoc in India. Okay, because at this moment Rahu is in Gemini sign and Aquarius Navamsha. Now the thing is that as the year goes on, Rahu will stay in the nakshatra of Adra till 20th May, and it will be doing its role. Though we can say that as Rahu moves from Adra Navamsha, not Adra Navamsha, Aquarius Navamsha to Capricorn and Sagittarius Navamsha, its intensity of giving results would reduce, and the results like it is giving at this moment, that there are all kinds of public protests going on all around the world, these things would decrease, and as Saturn moves into Capricorn, the law and order situation would prevail. Okay, so there would be kind of a the chaos in the world would gradually come under control with Rahu's progression further into Adra. But we need to bear in mind that the uh, peak point of Adra Nakshatra is at 6 degrees, which is the star of Betelgeuse. And Rahu moves to that particular point in the month of May. So month of May could be kind of, we can say, kind of very, very chaotic. I don't know if any major political election or scenario is coming up in that period, but there could be kind of a lot of disturbances going in and around the world. And Rahu particularly represents pollution. So there could be a kind of a major polluting event. And as I mentioned, that Venus is in the sign of Taurus. It is going retrograde in the sign. As I mentioned, Saturn is retrograde. So there could be a kind of a scenario where there could be a kind of oil spill. Okay, because oil spill is also a kind of a major oceanic pollution. This could be a particular event. Now the thing is that as Rahu moves from Adra, it moves to the nakshatra of Mrigashira. Mrigashira is a nakshatra of searching something, of finding something. And we know that Rahu is an explorer. Though Rahu is a very obsessive planet, but it is basically an explorer. It doesn't know where it is going. It just know how to, it just know that it needs to go somewhere. It need to search somewhere. Rahu is also an illusion. So as Rahu moves to the nakshatra of Mrigashira, there would be a kind of a sudden quest or search for something all around the world. People will be searching them, though they don't know what they want to search, but still there could be a kind of a search going on. People would not be very much satisfied in that particular scenario. In that particular scenario, because Rahu in Mrigashira mostly represents a kind of a illusionary search. People would be under a kind of illusion that things are going around in a very good way, but still things would not be very good at a very base level. Okay, so as Rahu progresses in the Mrigashira, this search will continue, and at the same time, 4 planetary retrogression will come in the month of in the second half of June 2020. And after that, Rahu and Ketu finally change their sign from Gemini Sagittarius axis to Taurus Scorpio axis. Now this seems to be a very good, but what we need to here remember is that Rahu would be moving from Gemini to the sign of Taurus. Gemini and Taurus are very good sign, and there is a continuation of the same nakshatra Mrigashira. So Rahu will not be affecting the world to a very great extent because it would be continuing its great journey in the same nakshatra. Okay, though there could be certain variation in the energies. What would be the major contributing factor during that period would be the movement of Ketu. The reason is that Ketu would be moving from the nakshatra of Mula to the nakshatra of Jyeshtha. Okay, now nakshatra of Mula and Jyeshtha is not only the Gandhanta point, both are also the very Ugra nakshatra. Okay, not Ugra, Tikshna nakshatra, sorry. So, and Ketu itself is a very Tikshna planet. Tikshna means sharp. Ketu has a quality to cut. Okay, so Ketu would be the planet which would be producing a kind of a lot of chaos in this world in that particular scenario. Okay, now Ketu as Ketu moves to the sign of Scorpio, which is said to be its own sign, the national 8th house, the sign co-owned by Pluto and Mars. So what we see here is that though we expect Ketu to be working very good, but Ketu would work in a good way after it moves out from the Jyeshtha nakshatra. Jyeshtha is a nakshatra of leadership, of show of power, and Ketu would be will be having kind of a clipping effect in the leadership and power. Another reason why I say is that we need to observe when they are changing the sign. They are changing the sign on 23rd of September, and from 10th of September, Mars would be retrograding, and Mars is a controller of Scorpio. So when Ketu is changing the sign, its dispositor Mars would be in a kind of a very disturbed state. So the sign of Scorpio would not be working in a very good way. It would be producing a kind of very disturbed effects. Okay, so as we can say that as Ketu moves to the sign of Scorpio, it would produce a kind of a disturbing effect on the leadership, because Jyeshtha is a nakshatra of Indra. Indra is a show of the power. So what we can say, Lissabeta, when are the elections in US scheduled?
They're scheduled on November 3rd of 2020. And what's interesting about the U.S. elections is right before the elections take place, Mercury goes into retrograde and it doesn't station direct until the day of the election.
Yes.
So I suspect that there will be some funny business going on, or you know what? There is always that possibility that the election, by some circumstance, who knows, could be postponed, or something could change on that day, or maybe perhaps the results will not show up for like another day or two. But it's going to be very interesting because, as we know, Mercury does rule the mind, but it also rules papers, documents, and ballots.
Sure. Yeah.
When you're submitting a ballot, I would imagine something's going to be going on. It's probably going to be one of those elections to remember throughout history. So
do you know where Mercury is going retrograde? Sorry,
I forgot. Let me fast forward.
Actually, I didn't check that.
Okay,
I have that. I have the dates of Mercury retrogression, but not the signs.
Let me just
but I think this time Mercury will be going retrograde in the air signs.
I think so.
That's
Hold on.
right.
In the
Libra.
air signs.
It's going retrograde in.
Yeah, Mercury is retrograde in Libra. So the sign of relationships, also the sign of law, and also the sign, believe it or not, politicians, because politicians are, Libra balances the scale. And so, there's going to maybe some court related stuff, maybe some legal, related stuff going on. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. So I definitely want.
Sun is also in Libra by then, which is even more important factor to consider. So.
Okay.
Yes, Sun also rules the government.
So what we can expect in the period of September and October, that there would be a kind of a lot of rhetorics going on in the election debates, and there could be kind of a big controversy or the fallout, because Ketu would be directly hitting the Jyeshtha nakshatra. Jyeshtha is a leader. As we discussed earlier also, that there could be kind of a there have been assassination attempts on the US president during the period. So particularly that could be the period when Rahu Ketu changes the sign, some mishap or some accident or certain bad thing may happen. I'm not particularly sticking to the POTUS, but any global leader. Okay, this scenario is possible. And overall, it has been observed that whenever one particular leader is affected around the world, all other leaders are affected. Okay, so it is a kind of a chain reaction, and Ketu in Jyeshtha will cut down the power. So if if elections are held, there could be many other countries where elections are being held, or provinces or states, and at that time the results would not be favorable for the government during that particular period. So Ketu would be very, very chaotic in this transit. Rahu can provide a kind of a stabilizing effect, but Rahu will be in Mrigashira and it would be having its own illusion that things are going all around, things are going good, but overall things would not be as expected. Okay, so anyone has to say anything about this Rahu Ketu axis?
So yeah, as you pointed out a good thing, that the Ketu will be in Jyeshtha cutting out the power. So I was also thinking that there may be some government or some authority which was holding its position for a long time will suddenly get uprooted out of
Dissolution.
nowhere. So there will be a dissolution of assembly. There can be a coup attempts in some certain areas of the world. So these out of because Mrikshira, because Rahu in Mrikshira is always very anxious. He wants to move on. He wants to change. He wants to hop. Rahu itself is a very chaotic energy. So when Rahu reaches Mrikshira, it becomes a tornado kind of a situation. And that too in the sign of Taurus, if you say, and Taurus is the sign of security, insurance, the second house, the natural second house. That takes a hit. So it will also impact the financial institutions all over the world. So maybe Rahu coming in Mrikshira can have this boom in the cryptocurrency thing. So there can be there may be some currencies which gets uprooted. The value of some currency in some part of the world can either be devalued to a great extent or can be overshot by some mark. So those also extreme scenarios. These extreme scenarios can also be possibilities at that point of time.
You talked a very good point about the coup attempts, and we need to remember that when Ketu would be in the sign of in the nakshatra of Jyeshta, at the same time Mars would also be retrograding.
Yes, see.
Okay.
So somebody will try to and come back
in
to
Aries
power.
and in Aries and Pisces.
It looks like you are directly threatening me.
Okay. So overall, like it seems to be another very powerful year, a very impactful year.
I think it's going to be far more impactful than the year 2019 because of just few things that we spoke about, but they have huge amount of significance when it comes to an yearly talk or something like that.
Okay. So now we go to the topic which no one speaks about Pluto. So Lissabeta has something to say.
Yes, that because traditionally in Vedic astrology, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune are not acknowledged, but when they came into sight back in the 1930s, that's when Pluto was discovered. And so during that time, when we look back, we had the Depression, we had Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, also. Yeah, Mussolini. There we go. America. So there was that going on. There was also the discovery of atomic energy, and there was a lot of, soon after Pluto was discovered, there was destruction, massive war. There was also, issues in relationship to substance abuse, drugs, addiction, sex, and like a whole bunch of gangsters here, at least in the U.S. And I would imagine all over the world, and trying to rig the banking system, because that's when, certain people in power were taking control of the banking system at that time. So if you see, Pluto is very similar to the sign of Scorpio, where it has to do with all those 8th house matters, those dark side matters, and just a little bit of history in terms of with Pluto is back in Roman mythology and Greek mythology, Pluto was also referred to as the god of the underworld, the dark side, the side that we don't see, the side that there's no light shed on. And in Greek mythology, they referred to it as Hades. They referred to Pluto as Hades. And Hades had a dog, a 3-headed dog that looked like a very fearsome beast, but it was to also represent the fears that we hold, those fears that we hold back in our psychology or, even within. So it's all those really deep, dark, repressed emotions and thoughts, and also has to do with scandals. So you'll see that whenever Pluto comes in conjunction, more so particularly with the larger planets like Saturn and Jupiter, there's significant things that take place. So I'm just going to go through the dates. Saturn is going to start transiting into Capricorn on February 22nd. And so soon after, so what that's going to do is Saturn is a planet that brings destruction, and it's a long-term planet. So its transit is somewhere between 12 to 30 years, and its transit in Capricorn is going to be, I believe, about 20 years. And when this happens, you'll start to see right away, as soon as it enters a new sign, there's like triggers, psychological triggers in terms of that sign. So in this case, since Capricorn is ruling society, rules the economy, rules authority, rules governments and stability, we're going to have like as soon as Pluto enters Capricorn in February and into March, you see like there's like these triggers with authority, you know, these psychological triggers. So people start to look within and they start to recognize, you know, someone's having a control over me, someone's having power over me, someone's ruling my money. There might be some issues, you know, starting to really come to the surface with regards to money, power, addictions, sex, control, you know, manipulation, because Pluto is also a very manipulative planet. So what's going to be happening in January is Saturn and Pluto are going to come into conjunction together. And I'm talking about January 12th, 2020. They're going to be in conjunction at 28 degrees and in the sign of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius also rules pathology. So there's going to be things that are going to be taking place where people are going to be trying to discover, well, where is all this disease coming from, you know? And Pluto is kind of like that dark, mad scientist in the sign of Sagittarius. So there's going to be a lot more focus on outbreaks, disease, and, you know, one of my concerns is of like a return of an old plague coming back in that time. And so you might see like a push for increase in vaccines like we've been seeing this year. There could be increased numbers of deaths. And I also refer to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction as like the widow's conjunction. Now, this is not in the books. This is something that I made up for all the viewers that are knowing, because I have like little tag words to kind of remind me of something. But the reason why I say widow's conjunction is because Saturn's very old, you know, and Pluto is like that, the dark side of death, you know, being alone, being old and alone. So there's going to be a sense where people in the global world are going to find like they're alone, like they don't have help, they don't have some kind of guidance and authorities. And so this is going to be one of the psychological fears that are going to be taking place, that people are going to have to acknowledge and work themselves through. And one of the interesting things is, you know, from a numerology perspective, 2020, well, 2 is ruled by the moon and 2 plus 2 is ruled by Rahu. So I'm also a little bit concerned about things with poisoning or contaminated foods and liquids and maybe oil spills. And also because Sagittarius is the sign for pathology, you know, I'm concerned about like mad scientist kind of things going on. So it looks like there's going to be like a power struggle in terms of medicine, in terms of healing, in terms of, you know, maybe the pharmacy companies and, you know, medical companies. So there's going to be a lot of things popping up in regards to that. And then come in March 23rd, 2020, we have Mars-Pluto conjunction. And Mars is going to be in God, I'm having a mental block, in Capricorn at that time. And this is where Mars is exalted. And so at that time, there's going to be these extreme desires and push for extreme energies, almost like a death wish type of energy. So I recommend everyone to, you know, do things that are very calming and soothing that time, because as Mars rules the blood, our bloods might be boiling. You know, we might feel a little bit more angry at that time, you know, angry with old structures, angry with people trying to have control over us, because Mars in the side of Saturn, in the side of Capricorn, and also is going to be in close conjunction with Saturn. Mars doesn't want to be controlled. Mars is an action-oriented planet. Mars is the one that wants to take control. So I'm a little bit concerned also during that time that because there's this extreme desire for control, it's also going to be an extreme desire for freedom, an extreme desire for liberation. There might be like rebellions taking place at the time. You might also see people trying to take matters in their own hands. So you might see attempted assassination attempts. It could be on presidents, PMs, people in the corporate, you know, culture, executive position. There's also going to be like war on sex trafficking, war on border control, war for land and for ownerships. And we'll also see that people have to be careful too with eating meat, because Capricorn rules the sheep and goats. So there's also going to be a concern about meat because Mars and Pluto are coming into conjunction at that time. So I would recommend that people be very careful with what they're consuming at that time. And then we have the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction taking place April 4th in 2020 at 0 degrees. And so that's a very powerful degree, because 0 is the infinite number, you know, so because it will create a lot of intensity, and Jupiter at the same time will also be in its place of debilitation. So there will be some kind of weakness, but it also means that the weakness, where's the weakness stemming from? The weakness is stemming from, you know, lack of power, our lack of ability to take control of our intuition, to use our wisdom, our lessons, our experiences in doing the right thing. And doing the right thing, when it's in Capricorn, you have to do the right thing to bring about stability. At the same time, interestingly, it's also a powerful opportunity where there could be treaties, taking place among other countries, trying to make agreements to stabilize the economy, to stabilize businesses, to stabilize banks, So the positive part of it, it could represent a time of luck, ironically, where people could do well in business because they're doing things that they haven't done before. They might be doing things that were considered taboo, and considered the past. But today, it's like, let's just go the extra mile. Let's just try something different. It may seem risky. So there's attempts to do risky things in terms of business and money opportunities, investments, trades. And you also might see a lot of people partnering up together, but it'll be more like silent partnerships. So in terms of, someone wanting to take advantage of that opportunity, they could definitely take advantage of that opportunity to do something business-wise. But at the same token, they have to be very careful whom they're doing business with. Pluto goes retrograde as of April 25th, 2020, 0 degrees in the sign of Capricorn. So this obviously is a degree of extreme power, extreme control, but at the same time, extreme healing and secrets. So they could be there could be like a discovery of hidden powers at play, hidden occult, hidden secret institutions. Maybe things are going to be revealed in terms of what the FBI, CIA, MI5, KGB, all these secret societies, secret governments. So it's almost like, they come to the forefront, and they're almost, people will see that these are part of the manipulations. These are the manipulators. These are the people that are power hungry, trying to take control of the society, trying to take control of the system, trying to take control of, global governments. And so there's going to be a recognition of false governments and false authorities. And so there's going to be a strong desire to break these chains with these people. And there's also going to be a very deep realization that, the power could be misinterpreted as like a disease, because some people get drunk off of power. Some people, and I don't mean like they're drinking literally, but they get very intoxicated with the idea of power. And then we have Pluto, who's going to be going retrograde back into Sagittarius, and Sagittarius being the sign of also enlightenment, gurus, higher education. But the thing that I want to make most note of is Pluto is going to retrograde from an earth sign to a fire sign, and then it's going to go direct from the fire sign back to the earth sign. So this indicates a transformation period, because Pluto is going to be going through this retrograde cycle for 6 months. So during this 6 months, from the sign of Capricorn, an earth sign, to the sign of Sagittarius, it's almost going to be like a rising of the ashes. You think about the animal phoenix, it burns into ashes to be, rebirthed to something new. So it's a very strong, powerful time in terms of spiritual growth, but in terms of growing where you have stability, where you have foundation. And one of the other most amazing things I believe for this Pluto retrograde transit that's going to be happening from June 28th up until, I think it's like December 30th, 2019, people are actually going to be so much more spiritual, so much more intuitive, so much more psychic. I mean, people might even have a past life recalls. They might experience things like deja vu. They might recall memories from a different life, in their dreams, or, through like connection of a guru, through maybe some kind of spiritual journey. So it also indicates spiritual powers, magic, things that are happening that are beyond our physical understanding. So there's going to be a great awareness of our internal powers and how we could use our internal power, our wisdom, our psychic abilities to really transform our thoughts, to transform our psychology, because in reality, we're all very creative beings. Humans are very creative. So when we are able to transform our mind in the way we think, we could transform the universe, we could transform society, we could transform the way we live, we could transform governments. Everything can happen. And so you'll also see during this period that there's going to be a strong connection between people and occult knowledge, secret society, gurus, astrology, and also this is the most interesting thing, hidden leaders that you really don't talk about are going to become coming to the surface, to bring forth further transformation. Now, what's very interesting too is Jupiter is going to go retrograde with Pluto going retrograde. There's a conjunction between the two. This is taking place on June 30th. It's going to happen at 29 degrees in Sagittarius. This is last degree of Sagittarius. And so one of the things that may take place, I'm not God, I just try to predict as best as I can. There could be a death or a stepping down of a monarchy. There could be delays in announcing, who the successor is. There could be a change of tradition, because Jupiter retrograde along with Pluto retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius could, indicate a change in traditions, change in things that happen, that we are accustomed to. There could also be some kind of religious or spiritual leader. Even for the Pope, maybe stepping down. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Sagittarius does rule spiritual, leaders, gurus. So there could be also a breakdown of religious institutions. And just imagine how that would be. The second Pope to step down, that could seem very scandalous. And people would be wondering, like, what the heck is going on, So there could also be scandals in respect to patriarchal establishments, legislations, male world leaders. So these are the things that we're going to have to look out to. So people that we thought that were our spiritual leaders, that we may have had some kind of spiritual or, religious connection to, they might come to disappoint us. And this could be like a major psychological breakdown for humanity, where they have to kind of rebuild themselves all over again, rebuild their sense of understanding. Who is it that they're trusting to be their guru? Who is it that they're trusting to be their spiritual leader? So what does this do? This forces humanity to turn within and to say, hey, you know what? I have to learn how to trust my own intuition. I have to learn how to be my own leader. I can't rely on these people to guide me. We have to be able to guide ourselves. And interestingly, with Saturn transiting Capricorn, there's that sense of, I need to take responsibility for my belief system. I need to take responsibility from where I'm going. I need to retake my responsibility as a teacher. It could be a teacher in a small level, teaching your children, teaching pets, teaching groups, communities, and so forth. So there's a bigger responsibility, in this respect to our belief system. And the other thing that I also noticed that could be happening was, and is, evidence with regards to links between major world governments and secret societies, such as like Illuminati, Bilderberg, Knights of Templar. We hear about them all the time, but don't be surprised if you see and start reading all these kind of publications about them, and real connections where people are going to be like, oh my God, that could actually be happening. One of my other things that I am a bit concerned about is that there may be an attempt to overthrow federal, state governments with the use of like militia, the more smaller sized armies coming to kind of take charge. And of course, someone mentioned coups before, very strong possibility for a coup taking place. And another thing is there's going to be concern about diseases. And, like I said before, Sagittarius rules pathology. So I'm concerned about people using vaccines as a bioweapon, using disease as a bioweapon, and contaminating the bloodstream, contaminating water, contaminating the environment. And one of the things that I did feel it was going to take place is, interestingly, is that there's going to be a rise in the price of water, and we all need water to live. So these are going to be some kind of very interesting things that will be taking place. And then we have Jupiter-Pluto direct conjuncting again, November 12th, 2020 at 28 degrees in Sagittarius. So it could be that a new royal monarch, will be announced as a successor. It could be that maybe there's a new spiritual leader in town that's being announced that day. Monarchy, governments, religions, spiritual leaders, establishments are going to be setting up like new laws, new rules in order to establish more control, perhaps more manipulation, but order and structure for the sake of modernizing with the current times. And at the same time, it's going to be an excellent time for deeper spiritual work, for foreign travels, for connecting with new spiritual leaders, and for developing our spiritual abilities, our psychic powers, and the power within ourselves to kind of control our future and our own path and our own desires and destinies. And probably one of the most fun things I'm going to be looking forward to is some more archaeological discoveries in terms of these previous archaeological discoveries providing us secret insight that was never discovered before, that's going to point us in the right direction in terms of science and spirituality. And so Pluto finally is going to be entering Capricorn on February 20. I think I already said that. So yeah, so it's going to enter back into Capricorn at the end of the year. I think on the 30th or 31st of December. And so you're going to see like there's going to be like a reintroduction to government reforms. There's going to be a desire to change wrongs to rights. There's going to be a desire to kind of stop corruption. So this is where the process starts to take place, because people are going to be facing their fears in regards to the government, in regards to the corruption, in regards to authority, in regards to the economy, in regards to money, career, and control. So, you know, people are going to be finally realizing after all this takes place for most of the year in 2020 that, you know what, we got to do something about it. Something's going to be changed. And you'll also see, as far as change is concerned, rules and things in terms of new currency, establishing independence in terms of currency, and also breaking chains in terms of currency and banking system, because there's going to be a breakdown in tradition, rules, and structures with regards to Capricorn matters. And so that's my take as fast as I could tell you guys without taking up time.
I would say that it was it was very deep and wonderful analysis. And from my basic and limited knowledge of Pluto, what I can say is that Pluto is a planet which represents transformation, transmutation. It is a planet which represents a large scale destruction. Like we can say that if Mars represents violence, then Pluto is like a massacre or a genocide. So Pluto, so Pluto is a kind of a super Mars, inflated Mars, though it is small, very small, but it is inflated Mars. And Pluto also represents underworld. Okay, secret kind of things. Pluto is going in the sign of Capricorn, which is a natural 10th house, the seat of government or the power structure, system, organization. So it will transform, it will bring a kind of transforming effect on the power structure, organization, and all those kinds of things. So till now we were hearing the murmurs of what we can say new world order. This could be the time when we can actually see that something is happening.
Yes, that's exactly what's going on.
Probably.
Hope that happens. Hope whatever happens for good.
Yeah, but I think Pluto also brings a little bit of painful transformation. It's not probably going to be an easy transformation. I was just peeping into history as Lisa was kind of educating us, because I think it's going to be a Pluto return for United States, which is going to be a huge. Yeah, it's going to be a huge transformation that is going to happen in United States. And Pluto was in Capricorn before this in the year 1773. And USA declared itself, America declared itself independent in 1776. And not for 13 years did USA had a president, but the first president came in when Pluto was in opposition with Jupiter when it was in Cancer. George Washington became the first president of independent America. So whatever Lisa said with respect to how Jupiter has to play with Pluto and its relationship with Pluto is probably proven in the history, and we can actually expect whatever she said in this year. So I was just referring to the facts that happened before 350 years in the 18th century. So I think we are in for a lot of surprises, and there was also an earthquake in the year 1773, especially just before, just in the stroke of Pluto's transit into Capricorn in near Mexico. I think it's Guatemala, but I'm not very sure where it was. So I missed I forgot. So it was a 7.5 magnitude kind of earthquake. Just like Ved said, it's going to be a complete destruction and reformation of something from the scratch. So this entire country or the city had to be rebuilt. So it's going to be that kind of a rebuilding phase from our own inner self, not just from mundane point of view.
Any chance of World War happening? Because this is so much of
no. It's going to be a trade war, financial war, but probably not an actual.
Other than that, what we can say is that Pluto is a trans-Saturnian planet, and even in that, it is the last of the trans-Saturnian planet whose period of staying in one sign is very long. So it is known as generational planet. So Pluto will be staying in this sign for 20 years, as Lisa said. So this whole generation would be affected by this, and though there would be a kind of a, we can neither say a kind of a decay, but there would be a change in power structure, though it would be very slow. But like we are going in 2020, by 2040, 2045, there would be kind of a completely new system in place. Like we can say 20 or 30 years ago, there existed communism, but now there is almost no communism except for China. Okay, so
That's
There is no communism in China. It's market economy, but they're projecting it as communism. So it's probably high time that it might actually come out that China is actually not following communism, but market economy.
Okay. Pluto also represents communism, I think.
yes. Yeah, it does actually.
No, it makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, because it's manipulation, it's controlling your money, controlling your power. You know, that's what communism is. But you are right. It is, Pluto is having its return in the United States chart in the second house. It's not, I don't believe it's going to go into conjunction. Maybe next year, not next year, maybe 2021, 2022. But by the time it starts to have where it's returning to its natal position, it's going to be a definite transformation in terms of currency and how we earn money. And being that the U.S. is holds the financial district of the whole world, you're going to see that there's going to be a brand new currency and system and wave of earning money. So that's something to look out for. So we might not have, we might not have credit cards anymore. There might be some kind of different way to monetize ourselves. Just I pray it's not chips. Like I don't like that stuff.
Maybe cryptocurrencies. Maybe cryptocurrencies.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It will be. That will be the new wave. And just so you guys know, I might be ending. I might have to chime out because I have appointments. So, I did want to take this quick opportunity to say that this has been an absolute joy and pleasure and honor to really be among all of you on the panel here. And it's been very informative and even, enlightening for myself. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone.
Yeah, we thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa, for joining us and also enlightening us with such a great insight.
Good, I'm glad.
So I think it was a wonderful session we all had.
It was an amazing session. And thank you everyone for being on the panel. We hope to do such kind of sessions more in the future and have such kind of awesome Astro Hangouts with more topics to come and more things to explore. So I thank you everyone and
thank you so
namaste.
Much.
Thank you everyone and hope to see you all soon. Bye-bye.